Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. So glad that you've joined us. We have a lot to get to, but first, shock around the country with a shooting that targeted Republican lawmakers outside of the nation's capital. A congressman wounded and 3 members of our Michigan congressional delegation on that baseball field where the shots were fired. We are going to start there tonight, and joining me now is our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. When this news started to break on Wednesday morning, it was just one of those things that you just had to stop and say, where are we living right now and what is happening? Stephen, I'm going to start with you because you spoke to Mike Bishop, Congressman Mike Bishop, who was on the field yesterday. And what were your impressions of when he was speaking to you and what his thoughts were?
It was actually WDET's Pat Batchelor who was on the phone with him. We played it on the show that I host on that station, though. You know, the fear, the absolute terror, really, was so evident in his voice. I mean, Mike Bishop's someone we've known for a long time in public life in this state, and he's not someone I would ascribe intense emotions to in any real context. Yesterday, it was really evident that this shook him, and he said to me, or said to Pat, this changes everything. And I don't know what he meant by that. I don't know if he was, I mean, I'm certain he was in shock, but I think it was that kind of moment for him where it's a reset, where you're sort of reevaluating everything, at least in that moment.
In that moment, that's what he was feeling. What do you think about that phrase, this changes everything, Nolan? And you wrote a column today talking about, you know, blame no one in this situation but the shooter.
And so that's why it changes nothing. I mean, this guy was obviously not a rational person. He's obviously deranged, obviously has mental problems, just like the young man who shot Gabby Giffords 6-7 years ago. Nothing changes about that. I mean, you have people who are going to act on their passions, on their impulses, on whatever it is, crazy thing that drives them. But the truth is, some people are just crazy, and we could change everything we do, you know, in terms of our tone and our rhetoric and what have you. It's not going to change the fact that you got some people out there who flat out behave in irrational, violent matters.
But they behave in violent, irrational ways, but is that fed by the tone and the rhetoric and the conversations that we're having? Representative Jack Bergman from Michigan was also on the field, and, you know, he tweeted out today, he said, you know, we're talking about motive, but he said, quote, "This is a good time to reflect on division and unity." What do you make of that, Stephen?
Well, I mean, I think, look, this has been a violent nation from the very beginning. It's born of rebellion. It endures a bloody war that claims 500,000 lives to get rid of the scourge of slavery. I mean, everything about this country is sort of bathed in this idea that violence is an acceptable means to a certain end. Think of the violent oppression of people in this country that's happened since its inception. That is the context in which we're talking about these things, and so I think it's very difficult to imagine how you change those things. People are in this is one of the most violent nations in the Western world. 60,000 people a year get shot, 11,000 murdered by guns every year. I mean, this is who we are. I don't submit to the idea that there's nothing we can do. I think there are ways to even if you're not going to change the violent impulses that people have, the means that they have to carry out those violent impulses can be restrained, but the violence itself is just it's America.
Without going down the road of gun control, that's not a conversation that I want to have today. You're talking about you don't want anyone to make this political. You want to say take the politics out.
I think it's fine. You look what I wrote today. You go back in 2011 when Gabby Giffords was shot. Oh my God, it's Sarah Palin's fault. You had the New York Daily News. The blood of Gabby Giffords is on Sarah Palin's hands. It was Rush Limbaugh's fault. It was the hostile rhetoric of the Tea Party. Now, 6-7 years later, you've got Republicans shot, and you've had months of this sort of outrage and hostile language from Democrats, and we're saying, oh gosh, now we got to change the rhetoric and what have you. Look, this guy was known to be a troubled person. What sort of help did he get? I mean, what are we doing for the mentally ill people in our society? And I'd say not much. And I don't think he was driven by, you know, some Hollywood producer staging a silly play, or what he was hearing from Democratic politicians or talk shows hosts. I think his own demons drove him. And, you know, we should start thinking about, he had been in this, there'd been warning flags with this guy. Why had nobody heeded them? I mean, why was there no intervention for this person?
Are we going to be seeing just some more different safety conditions for Congress and congressmen and women?
Well, I mean, I think that would be the really cynical response of lawmakers, right? To react to this in a way that protects themselves from this kind of thing, but doesn't do anything to protect the 60,000 people a year who suffer gunshot wounds, often in circumstances exactly like this. Not 2 months ago, a black lieutenant in Northern Virginia was killed by a right-wing extremist who just picked him out of nowhere, came up and shot him to death. Why shouldn't that person have more security if Congress does? I mean, these things happen a lot in this country, and they happen mostly to just normal people. I don't think the fact that it's happened to a congressman should inspire us to protect Congress more. It ought to inspire us to think better about how to keep everyone safe.
And I doubt they want to live under that sort of environment anyway. You know, their jobs depend on that close interaction with the people. I don't think they want a security detail in between them and their constituents. This happens. It happens infrequently, fortunately, and I think to overreact.
Congresspeople infrequently.
I think to overreact now would, after the deed's done, would be a mistake.